Welcome to another inspiring conversation. Today we're joined by Claire J. Gilchrist, founder of the Self-Empowerment Hub, to explore one of the most important topics in personal growth and mental well-being, self-improvement. In a world where many people feel overwhelmed by life's challenges, Claire believes that true transformation begins when we reconnect with our inner power and take ownership of our thoughts, choices, and future. We'll discuss how empowerment impacts mental health, the barriers that keep people feeling stuck, and practical strategies for building resilience, confidence, and lasting personal change. If you're ready to take back control of your life and unlock your potential, this conversation is for you. Let's get started. How are you, Claire?
Oh, Sid, I'm good. Well, I'm well. That would be the better English. I'm well, and it's lovely to be back here. So thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome. As I was telling you, Fair, it's been a really long while, and then you refreshed my memory. It's been over 1.5 years. Yet I thought it was like only just over 6 months.
But time just is so speedy at the moment. I also look back and think it wasn't half a year ago. It was like 1.5 years ago. So it's good. We start afresh in another year with a different topic.
Yeah, and it's always enlightening to have you on and to get the ball rolling with you, Claire. What does self-empowerment truly mean to you, and why do you believe it is one of the most important foundations for mental health and personal growth?
Okay, that's quite a loaded question. It's in essence, I suppose, a very large answer. So I'm just going to say to any viewers out there today, I am sitting with a laptop on my lap, just under my camera, because when I looked at answering some of these questions, they're in quite a lot of detail, and I don't want to forget it, quite simply.
Of
So
course.
let me start. So, having said that, self empowerment is actually quite a large topic, really depending on the context that you're looking at it in. So, generally, I suppose you could say it's a journey to reclaim ownership or authorship of your life and to develop the self awareness, the tools, and I suppose you could say the power to become the creator of your life and not just be on life's receiving end, which so often, well, I was going to say, which we so often are. Now, in the context of what I do, which is personal and corporate coaching and training, facilitation, counseling, and of course, my innovative mental health modality called frequency balance, which is very much on the go. And in terms of the context of what the Self Empowerment Hub is all about, it's the understanding really that you, my client, leave the session not being dependent on me or thinking that your process of change only occurs in our sessions, because that wouldn't be true. It's being able to use the wisdom and the awareness that we've uncovered and the tools that we've developed to continue your process of healing between sessions on your own. And this is one of my catchphrases at the moment. I don't fix you. I don't. I am the catalyst of your natural ability to change. And once we've activated that and you understand how, and you have the tools to move forward, you take it on. I can teach you a lot because this is my field of expertise, but self empowerment is you. It's you taking that, applying it in your life between sessions. You're the instrument of change in your own life, not me. I'm the information and the spark to help. I cannot do it for you. And I cannot stress this more. It's probably one of the most important foundations of healing in just about any therapy. So, to further answer your question, Sid, why is this so important for mental health and personal growth? Because it fosters non dependency. You know, on a therapist, a pill, a friend, a relationship, a partner. Um, Learning to be a leader in your own life is ultimately extremely freeing, and it's also very empowering. It means that your sense of worth, your value, your stability, your health, or your direction is not entirely dependent on other people or circumstances or external validation. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was awesome, Claire. Many people feel stuck, overwhelmed, or powerless in certain areas of their lives. What are the first steps they can take to begin reclaiming their personal power?
Okay, to me, I'm going to give you a couple of steps here. I'm actually going to give you three because there are many, many more. But today I've just honed into what I think is the most valuable. Your first step is awareness, and particularly self awareness, which we're going to talk about a little later on. You know, before we can change anything, we've got to understand where we've lost our power. You know, where we've given it to people or events or circumstances, sometimes letting them define us instead of getting help or taking action to define ourselves. And, you know, one could say, are we blaming? Are we sitting waiting for? Are we waiting for like a sign? Are we waiting around feeling helpless about stuff we could do something about? Even a small action can shift a feeling of helplessness. So that's the first point. The second point is really realizing that we have the power of choice. And here I'm going to refer to a very popular movie called The Devil Wears Prada 1. I mean, it's so much in the news now, having seen The Devil Wears Prada 2. But in 1, the very challenging Miranda Priestley, played by Meryl Streep, is always putting her appy, her assistant, Andy, although she calls her Emily, under a lot of pressure and forcing her to make the most awful decisions. Andy's response is classically always, but I didn't have a choice, when she's really made a bad decision. And I think what we've got to remember is, even though it may be difficult, we always have the power of choice. It sometimes takes a lot of courage to make a better one, but we always do have a choice. And the last point, action. As I mentioned earlier, just taking one small action step can shift a feeling of helplessness. Action is such a key concept. So, for example, setting boundaries, standing up for something, standing up for yourself, not saving others at your own expense. There are so many actions we could discuss, but in a nutshell, it's moving from life is happening to me to I have the ability, me, to influence what happens next. And even if you have severe mental health issues, that option is actually available to you if you know what to do.
Powerful. You've brought all your work together under the Self Empowerment Hub. What inspired this vision, and what impact are you hoping to create in people's lives?
Okay, well, to be honest, it was a very practical decision,
Okay.
but also a strong gut one. Firstly, I realized that in so many areas of my work, and there are actually many, that my focus is on self empowerment. So I really wanted that title to be the overarching umbrella defining what my work does for you. So that's, you know, whether in coaching, training, counseling, the mental health work I do, that the overarching umbrella should be something to do with self empowerment. And secondly, and practically, I have been so incredibly focused on developing my mental health modality, testing it, researching it, going through many, many clients using it, that I'd not had time for work that is very dear to me, which is coaching, which is corporate training, corporate facilitation, voice and communication skills. A lot of work that I used to do before mental health became my all consuming reality. So, the Self Empowerment Hub, is a new beginning for me. It's a way of bringing all the different arenas together. And in terms of impact, it really benefits people in the cross pollination. So, for example, you could bring quite deep mental health concepts into, let's say, voice and communication skills or anger management or, you know, a soft skill like EQ. Or you could bring soft skill concepts into counseling. So I'm finding that the cross pollination makes for much deeper and richer work, and it really gives people a well rounded experience.
How can someone distinguish between being a victim of circumstances and become the author of their own story without dismissing the very real challenges they face?
Okay, I'm going to give you two aspects here to have a look at in terms of victim. I think one of the differences lies in recognizing what happens to you in life versus what you choose to do with it. Okay, very important concept. And secondly, I think another is understanding the difference between being an actual victim of circumstance and playing the victim. So I'm going to unpack those a little bit further. So if I look at the first one, if you're a victim of circumstance, and we all often are,
Yeah.
it's sometimes painful, it's unfair, you feel. It can be really difficult. Being the author of your own story, or becoming the author of your own story, means acknowledging your challenges. You never don't acknowledge what you've been through, but not handing over your power to them and allowing them to define who you are or who you become because of that. Being self-empowered doesn't mean you haven't had it hard. Most of us do. But it means choosing between what you can't control and what you can influence. So the questions to ask yourself: where can I change? How can I respond to this differently? Where can I walk away? How can I help myself? What can I do? Where can I use my problems to help others, etc.? And I think here I should just illustrate very quickly with a story. It's actually not in my notes, but it's just popped into my head, so that means it's important. A lot of you in South Africa remember a rape victim called Alison. She's still very much out there. She was not only raped, but disemboweled in Port Elizabeth, in a field. She literally ran for help, carrying her intestines with her after this horrible, horrible ordeal. And yes, it took her a very long time to heal. I can only imagine what her process must have been. But she turned it into a book. It's become a play. She became a motivational speaker, and she stood up there and she really made sure that she helped people through this terrifying ordeal that she'd been through. That's what I'm talking about. Now, the second part is also interesting, being a victim versus playing one. And I'm going to segue this into mental health, actually, because I've seen this so often with clients, and I think it might be very interesting for anyone out there that does have a mental health issue. Often when you've gone through really tough stuff, let's say bipolar, for example, and you start recovering, you start managing it better, through therapy preferably than just meds. If you've had it a while, it's quite hard to shift into recovery, as it would be for anyone who's been ill to recover and trust the recovery. It's not that you can't recover, you very much can, but to move into recovery after, let's say, being ill for, I'm thinking of one of my clients, 30 years, in and out of clinics, in and out of rehabs, in and out of recovery centers, getting to recover and actually trusting that you've shifted that far forward can be quite difficult. Thinking of living life differently, thinking of living life, not just being sick. And I've had clients who hamper their recoveries because their IDs, their identities, are so woven into being dysfunctional that they want to stay there. Much easier. It's what they know. It's where they come from. It's how people have helped them. And we often go back to what we know. So you find the behaviors then often reflect playing the victim to stay helpless rather than moving forward. And of course, that's just one example. And I've quoted this very specifically because it's something I've been working with quite recently. But in terms of playing the victim, obviously there's so many avenues in life that one could.
That's really interesting. In your experience, what are the biggest mental and emotional barriers that prevent people from stepping into their full potential?
Look, there be many, 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 many. But I'm going to just give you some examples. These are one that jumped into my mind when I looked at this. Fear, self-doubt, lack of confidence, laziness, habit, lack of self-awareness, and often a self-image that either overdoes or underdoes in terms of what is achievable for you. I think real potential is gained by understanding exactly who you are and where to set the bar for yourself. So, for example, if you lack confidence, you may underestimate yourself completely. And if you're a perfectionist, for example, you may set the bar so high that you can never achieve what you feel you think you have to achieve, and then you feel you failed. Also, and very importantly, I do think what other people tell you you're capable of can be a huge barrier in terms of what you think you can achieve. And I think you have to be the one to decide that. And I think full potential means full self-awareness of, sorry, let me say that again. Full potential means full self-awareness of who you actually are.
Yeah, that's really thought-provoking. How does self-awareness contribute to self-empowerment, and what practical exercises can people use to better understand themselves?
I was just going to say, I think the next question leads on so beautifully. We go back to self-awareness, because that for me is one of the biggest things. I think we often wander around this planet not really knowing who we are, or having a semi-idea or idea. But let me get back to it and not divert here. It's so huge in terms of self-empowerment. And I think the best way to describe this is just to illustrate with some examples, okay? Because you've asked me for some practical exercises that people
Yeah.
can use to better understand themselves. And I'm also going to give you a practical exercise to help you deal with who you actually are, okay? So, for example, let's say you're quite a reactive person and your trigger is someone being rude to you, which provokes you to be rude back, shout, get aggressive, maybe start a fight. But there are tons of people out there listening to me. I've trained this in corporate so often, and I watch people's faces get redder as they start going, oh, yes, no, that's me. Okay, so be rude back, start shouting, get aggressive, and maybe start a fight. So the question you have to ask in terms of self-awareness is this an empowered choice? Well, the shouting may seem powerful, but in fact, it's really just disruptive, and it doesn't actually solve any problems. Now, the unspoken rule of resolving conflict is to put the fire out. So imagine responding impulsively and very aggressively to some sort of rudeness at work and creating absolute havoc. It's not going to do you any favors in the long run. And then you've lost your power to the rude person. In fact, you've become their victim. But if you know this is your trigger, so what I'm saying is if you know it, meaning you are self-aware, you're aware of it, then you can employ some sort of change to help it, however you choose to do that. So I'm going to give you 2 exercises to empower yourself by A, reducing a trigger, and B, offering a better response. So this is all in the name of self-awareness. Firstly, an exercise called the trigger tracker. So after the fact, if you've gone the shouting route, ask yourself, what happened? So I'm going to pretend to be both people here. I'm going to be the person asking themselves what happened, and I'm going to answer for them. Okay, so I went shouting off because someone was rude to me. They were snide, they were sarcastic, and it just tickled my wick, and I went off. What happened? I went off like a banshee because actually, in terms of realizing who I am, that really triggers me. Great. What emotion did I feel? Simple. Okay, no. What emotion did I feel? Anger, distraction, right? Is this my go-to? Yes. What did I learn about myself today? That I have a go-to that I find very difficult to control. If someone's rude to me, I just go, I want to get you.
Yeah.
How can I change this? And that's the most salient question. So I'm going to offer you a response here. For the next time, if you're a person like this and you've achieved the self-awareness, so important, that this is how you operate. Next time, use a little formula that's come down the ages, but it's so beautifully put by Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He says between the stimulus and the response, you have choice. Meaning, between the stimulus, that is someone being rude to you, and your response, which is, I want to nail you, you have choice. If you take just a second to employ that choice, you have a choice as to how you want to respond. And that can change the whole ballgame. It takes practice. It's often sitting with yourself going, okay, if someone is rude to me, what would I do instead of my knee-jerk go-to reaction? What better choice could I make? And here are some of them. We call it assertive communication. You could look at the person and say, oh, I'm sorry you feel like that, and walk away. You could look at the person and just go, okay, and walk away. You could look at your watch and go, oh no, I hear you. Oh gosh, it's 12 o'clock. I've got to be somewhere. We'll connect later. Whatever it is, and it does take practice, and it's often worth getting a bit of help with it. But to keep your power intact, you need to make a better choice in terms of your response. And that's where self-awareness is so incredibly powerful. If you know how you respond, this is just an example. You could be looking at a response where you try and save someone, or you cave in when they're aggressive, or, endless different options. Is looking at your response, keeping your power, and deciding how you want to respond.
Many individuals struggle with self-doubt and limiting beliefs. How can they begin rewriting the internal narrative that holds them back?
I think we've got to distinguish between, not really distinguish between self-doubt, narrative, and belief. I think we've got to recognize that an internal narrative is just that. It's a narrative, meaning a story. It's not always fact. I mean, you have an intrinsic makeup that very much affects the way in which you express yourself, or the beliefs you have, or the way in which you act or react towards people. And that's something that you may wish to change. But over time and living life, I think we all develop stories about who we actually are, and what's possible for us. So, in terms of who we are, what we're capable of, how others see us, what's possible for us, these stories are often shaped by our experiences, by our upbringing, by our relationships, by our setbacks, by our successes, by our cultural influences. And the challenge is that they don't always serve us as we age, but we sort of persist in living our lives as if they are absolute truth. And that narrative and story that you've been telling yourself, or you've been cultivating for many, many years, can just come from some incident that happened, many eons ago. I'm just giving you an example. So my advice is to question your doubts thoroughly. And you may need help with this. But you've got to get to the source of where that self-negation comes from before you accept it blindly as your identity or truth. So what I was trying to say was, in the beginning, you've got to establish the difference between the narrative that you're telling yourself and your identity, because a narrative is not necessarily your identity. So good examples, you may think, I'm not good enough, I always fail, I'm not confident, people will never take me seriously, I'm stupid, I'm too scared to. And the problem is not that these thoughts come up. How many of us don't have thoughts like this that come up? The problem is that they become accepted as your identity. And that's not self-awareness in action, okay? If you become really self-aware, you'll be able to acknowledge, this is who I am now. versus this is who I was then, but I've changed, or I can change, or this is a story I've been telling myself about myself. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example here, just in terms of corporate coaching, voice and communication training. I can't tell you how many people I've coached who are incredibly anxious when they get up to speak. And it's become part of their identity. And what I always say in a training is, don't stand up and say to me, when I get up to speak, this is what happens to me. Like it's an absolute craven truth. Say to me, when I get up to speak, I get very anxious. Why? And what can I do about it? So that's the point I'm making here. Don't let issues that have come from, I don't know, I remember having a client long ago who had this issue. And we finally established in session that she got very anxious when she spoke because of a very aggressive father when she was young. If she had to stand up and talk to him, he was quite, not abusive, but he was, quite a powerful figure. And it made her feel very anxious. So every time she stood up to speak to what she perceived as bigger than her, she got anxious. So we sorted it out and we gave her techniques to help her. So it doesn't mean that because you have an issue that it's part of your identity.
Wow. What role does personal responsibility play in mental wellness, and how can people embrace accountability without falling into self-criticism?
Okay, so personal responsibility, I would say, is one of the cornerstones of mental wellness because it shifts our focus from what's happening to us to what we can do about it. That's key. If we're accountable for our thoughts, our choices, our behaviors, and our responses, I really think we reclaim a sense of ownership of ourselves. We stop waiting for circumstances, other people, or the past to change, or change just to happen all by itself. And a lot of people do that, and they sort of wait for it to happen somehow before they can move forward. And actually, if you take responsibility for how you respond to life and how you develop in it, then you're taking ownership of it. And I think the key to remember is that accountability and self-criticism are not the same thing. Self-criticism says, I made a mistake, therefore I'm a failure. Accountability says, I made a mistake, therefore I have something to learn or change. So one actually attacks your identity and the other one changes your behavior. So they're actually quite separate in that way. And personal responsibility is not about becoming self-critical. It's about becoming self-understanding, self-awareness. The goal is not to judge yourself more accurately. It's to know yourself more deeply and decide how to help yourself through life.
Can you share a transformative client story that demonstrates the power of self-empowerment in overcoming adversity, anxiety, or major life challenges?
Yes, I can. And I'm going to give you two, one a little bit longer on a more severe issue, one a little shorter on a less severe. One of my more severe bipolar clients with whom I've worked for 3 years now, very intensively. From being in recovery centers and clinics and suffering incredibly, she now lives on her family estate in Scotland. She runs it, she shops, she drives, she plays sport. She plays more sport than I ever could. It puts me to shame in terms of exercise. She does massage as a profession. She actually goes into old people's homes and she does hand massages for sometimes 15 people at a time because it helps them connect. I mean, hand reflexology is very powerful, and that's quite a mission considering the amount of energy it takes.
Mhm.
She's able to go on 2 overseas holidays in the last 9 months. So if we look at the power of self-empowerment, yes, it's taken a lot of work. But what she finally snapped into was religiously using tools that I've developed for the illness and that we've developed, that we've worked out together in session. And she's used these tools both as routine in her daily life and intervention if she's about to fall off the bus. And she does fall off the bus now and again. And then she rebels and she doesn't want to use tools, but she gets back to it. And because she's taken her healing into her own hands and she's used what we've done in session, she's able to get back on the bus and do that most important thing, which is allow that beautiful ability called neuroplasticity to kick in. And that's the ability of the brain to carve new pathways, new neural pathways as you practice new habits, which she does every day. And that affects change in her body and her mind. She works it every day. And she's changed perspective from being a sufferer to being in recovery. Yes, we have rough patches. I'm certainly not saying that we don't, but the difference in her is absolutely amazing, because what she had to learn was to take her own healing on board. And that's been my point right from the beginning. The healing lies in you. I can't fix you. I can empower you, I can help you, I can share my wisdom, I can catalyst you, but I actually can't do it for you. You have to. And then on to a less serious one. I don't know where my notes are. That's quite strange, but it's a session that didn't happen too long ago, so I will remember. I did some voice and communication training earlier this year in corporate, and one of the clients really took it on board, and she went away and she practiced tools and she sat looking in the mirror and she worked on voice technique. It's difficult for corporate people to do this because a lot of the voice techniques I use come from me being an actress all the years ago, and I've taught physical voice for many, many years. And she fed me back after the coaching program, and she just said to me, "Oh, thank you so much for the tools you've left me with." She said, "Every time I speak in public, they've made such a difference. I feel more confident, my voice is stronger, I've enjoyed myself." So she took responsibility for warming up, for using tools to empower herself. The self-awareness of what her problems were we developed in session, but we only had 6 sessions, and after that she had to walk forward and do it for herself. And she did.
Wow, really inspiring. Lastly, if every viewer could leave this conversation with one mindset shift that would immediately improve their mental health and quality of life, what would that be?
Okay, I'm going to give you 2.
Mhm.
The first one is the one that I've really been harping on for most of the chat. The second one is slightly jokey, but I think it's quite true. The first one is, whatever you don't like about yourself or whatever you feel is a problem, don't wallow in it or judge it.
Mm.
Question yourself, help yourself, and however you do it, find a way to change it. It's really the simplest thing to do. It's not that difficult. Sitting in it, wallowing in it, turning that mental loop round and round and round and round that makes you feel worse and worse is
Mhm.
not the way. The way to go is to start developing self-awareness by questioning yourself, figuring out a way to change what you don't like. Everything is changeable if you want it to be. That's the one. And then the other one is one of my personal bugbears, I think you could say. Question everything on this planet. Question everything. Don't accept everything blindly. There's a lot of issues out there, from medications that we're encouraged to take, from food we've sold, the old adage being, if you can't understand the words on the label, please don't eat it.
Mm.
From food and drink related to culture in advertising, not health. You name it, we are blindsided so often. And that mindset is the shift. Question everything. I mean, this is my small example. Take the culture of Coca-Cola, right? Funky, cool, hip, part of the lifestyle. It's so part of our lives. Yet you know it's used to clean toilets. And it can dissolve teeth if you leave teeth in a mug with Coke for 2 days.
Wow.
And it's advertised as an empowerment drink because it's so cool and hip. Not. So I'll leave you with this. Question everything, everyone, including yourself.
In a nutshell, were you trying to say that a person needs to have mind over matter, and then two, a person should not be gullible, especially when it comes to receiving information?
Sorry, Sid, just say that again.
Oh no, I was saying like in a nutshell, are you saying that one should have the ability to have mind over matter, and then two, the person shouldn't really be gullible when it comes to receiving information?
Two, absolutely. Don't be gullible when receiving information. We're very gullible in this world. We're subject to culture, we're subject to advertising, we're subject to people desperate to sell products. And we don't always see. I'll tell you a little story now to illustrate that. Mind over matter, not necessarily. Okay?
Okay.
When things happen, question them, analyze them, get to the
Mm.
source, and find a way to help yourself forward. Okay? It can be emotion over matter, not just mind over matter.
Okay.
There's so much I can share here in terms of, when you do get into trouble, when difficult things happen, you've got to learn to process your emotions. You should get to the source.
Mm.
I won't now because I'd keep you here all day. But in terms of questioning, because I'm involved in mental health, and that means being involved in health as well. A lot of my mental health clients have their diets firmly changed by me. I'm developing an online course and putting a book together with that in mind at the moment. And that's one of the tools that I use right at the beginning, because you can actually change your stability. You can up your stability by 50% in a week by changing your diet and eating for your blood sugar. And not many people know that, and not many mental health sufferers know that. So I grew up like that. And obviously, this is something I've explored hugely as I've gone on in my therapy, coaching, etc. career. And I'll tell you two stories very quickly. I had a client, a coaching client, an executive coaching client, who had suddenly become very anxious after I'd finished her executive coaching sessions with her. So her company insisted that she came back to me off her own bat. And in the first session, we started delving into the anxiety, and she said to me, I can't pinpoint it. It's just generalized anxiety, but then I drive past an area that I was hijacked in at night on my way home, and that still makes me very nervous. So I said to her, fine, then that's something we've got to get into. And I said, the generalized anxiety? She said, I don't know. I said, are you eating? Because I'd already done diet with her. She said, yes. I'm taking my snacks to work. I'm eating at my desk. I'm making sure I don't miss meals. I'm, doing everything right. And then she said, with all the pounds of salt that I'm somehow needing at this point. And I said to her, salt? Why salt? And immediately my intuition kicked in and I went, salt. Okay, that means you're dehydrated. So I said to her, how much fluid are you drinking in the day? And she just looked at me and she said, maybe a cup of coffee in the morning, and I think a cup of coffee at night. Now, considering that you need between 1.5 and 2 liters of fluid that isn't caffeinated in a day, she was severely dehydrated. And salt helps dehydration. It's an electrolyte. It helps your body bind to the little fluid that you're having. So I said to her, okay. And she'd already been to the doctor, was put on an high blood pressure because she'd been eating all the salt. So all we did was up her fluid intake to make sure that she got the water and the proper fluid that she needed. She came off the high blood pressure meds and the anxiety disappeared because the high blood pressure was also causing the anxiety. That's how simple it can be. And the gullibility comes in when we think that anxiety is purely in the head and doesn't have to deal with the body. We are holistic beings. We need to look at everything. So that's what I'm saying. Don't be gullible. Have a look at everything. It's like a doctor giving an antibiotic. If you have flu, it's a virus, you don't need an antibiotic. That's for bacteria. And that's why we develop bacterial resistance. And that's also why antibiotics make us feel even worse if we don't need them. And it's become a thing because obviously we have a pharmaceutical industry that has a bind with the medical industry, and things have become different. I never forget a doctor saying to me when I explained that my very first doctor, and I'm quite old now, had a lab and he cultivated bacteria and checked what you had. If you had a virus, he said, go to bed, rest, take vitamin C. If you had bacteria, he'd say it's streptococcus, pneumococcus, staphylococcus. That's the right antibiotic. And this doctor just looked at me and she went, oh, that's the old-fashioned way. So I don't think good things are all old-fashioned. So that's why I say self-empowerment, question everything. Develop self-awareness. Learn about industries other than your own so that you have a fair knowledge, that you're not taken advantage of. And with that, I think I should end it because once you start me on this, I don't stop.
Thanks so much for your time, Claire, and hope to
So,
catch up with you once again.
yeah,
Take
lovely
care.
to catch up with you as well. We'll chat again.